Hello everyone and welcome to another exciting Camp Cretaceous video by Jeremy James Prutchick. Recently, the highly anticipated 4th season of Camp Cretaceous premiered on Netflix, and I watched the entire thing in one night. And I must say that this was a rather unusual season for both good and bad reasons. There were some things that Season 4 did really well, and other things not so much. So did the good stuff outweigh the bad stuff, or was it the other way around? Well, get ready, because I'm going to tell you as I review the 4th season of Camp Cretaceous. Now, just before I begin, there are a few quick things I want to mention. The first thing is a spoiler warning. There are going to be spoilers for Season 4 of Camp Cretaceous in this video. Second thing, especially if you're new here, this review is going to be audio only. But don't worry, because the third thing is that there are going to be timestamps in the video description that'll correspond with specific topics. So let's get started with my review of Season 4 of Camp Cretaceous. Something that Camp Cretaceous has always done is focus on a different theme each season while still keeping the story fresh and exciting. Season 1 focused on action, Season 2 focused on adventure, Season 3 focused on horror/thriller, and Season 4 focused on techno/thriller. So how did that fare for this season? Well, some things were good and some things were not. For this particular section, I'll focus on the positives. So what was different about the technology this season? Well, quite a lot of it. Now, technology was present in the other seasons of Camp Cretaceous, but in much smaller doses. What makes Season 4 so different is that technology was everywhere. It was like a whole new world, not like the traditional dinosaur island that we're used to seeing. Season 4 effectively illustrated the idea that technology can be very dangerous in the wrong hands. These wrong hands developed many dangerous things this season. They were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop and think if they should. Sound familiar? Yeah, Jurassic Park, a science fiction classic. It's essentially the same message in Season 4, only this time it's with machines rather than with dinosaurs. And speaking of works of science fiction, there are a few nods to some other popular works of science fiction throughout Season 4. One of them is from the late great Michael Crichton. Apart from Jurassic Park, Crichton wrote lots of other science fiction books, and one of these books is called Prey. It's about nanobots and artificial intelligence, man versus machine. It's a really good book. And a lot of the scenes of Manticore's secret base, like the tunnels or some of the labs, remind me of the laboratory base in Prey. So there's a little bit of similarities between Prey and Season 4 of Camp Cretaceous, sort of like a tribute to Michael Crichton. And there's one other interesting tribute, or maybe it's an Easter egg. Brooklyn makes a comment about artificial intelligence, AI for short. This could be a subtle nod to a movie by none other than Steven Spielberg, Artificial Intelligence, which starred a young Haley Joel Osment, who did the voice for Kash this season. It might not be intentional, but I thought those were some interesting connections. Now there's one more theme that was featured in Season 4, but it's sort of like a side theme because it's not the main one, and that is romance. Yep, romance. Kenji and Brooklyn are now a couple. I honestly didn't think we were going to see romance at any point in this show, and I only found out about it like the day before Season 4 premiered. I read somewhere in an interview or something, and I think Swerve did a video about it, that said that there will be romance in Season 4. But between who? There weren't any obvious signs of romance between anybody by the end of Season 3. I was skeptical about romance being in this show, because if they did go with romance, then they'd have to stick with it for the rest of the story. Here's what I mean by that. When Jurassic World Dominion comes out next year, are we going to ask ourselves if Kenji and Brooklyn are still together? A lot can happen in between movies. I mean, Claire and Owen broke up after Jurassic World, and they got back together in Fallen Kingdom, but it's like I said, they gotta keep going with it now. Now, I've seen some people's comments here and there talking about how Kenji and Brooklyn's romance felt forced, and I can see why people might think that. And I kind of agree. At least in the beginning, I felt the romance kinda just came out of nowhere, and it wasn't just a small comment or two either. There were several times that it came up in just the first few episodes. So at first, it felt like a lot was being thrown at you all at once, but afterwards, the romance sort of eased up a bit, and only came up once in a while. So by the end of the season, I was okay with it. It just had a surprising start, that's all. So as far as Kenji's and Brooklyn's romance goes, well, we'll see what happens and hope for the best. One of the best things about Season 4 was the character development. This is what Season 4 did right, and that's because most of the characters got a relatively fair amount of development. Every character had their own personal struggles at some point, like when Darius felt guilty about the dinosaur fight, and especially when Sammy felt responsible for the Spinoceratops babies being born. The best thing is that they were all there for each other. Brooklyn said a nice line that I remember very well. She said, "We're still Camp Cretaceous." So just like every other season review I've done, I'm going to go over each of the characters in no particular order and look at their development this season. And I'm going to start off with someone that may surprise you, just like they surprised me, Kenji. Wow, they really did good with him here. And in such quick time, might I add. I'm impressed. When we last saw Kenji in Season 3, he was acting all Sasuke Uchiha around Darius. But by the end of the first episode this season, I thought he showed a lot of promise. He almost immediately dropped the obnoxious prick attitude and became the good friend kind of guy. He risked his life to save Darius in the ocean, and he even jumped on the Sabretooth Tiger to save Ben. He was willing to put himself in danger to protect his friends. Kenji's one of the few characters that really stood out this season, and that says a lot, especially given my fluctuating opinions of him throughout the series. In Season 1, I was kind of indifferent towards him. I didn't really like him, but I didn't really hate him either. In Season 2, he was a bit more likable, and then in Season 3, I did not like him at all, and I also said that whatever development he did have got thrown out the window. But after Season 4, Kenji got it all back, and then some. I actually like him a lot more now. Think back to Kenji in Season 1, now look at him at the end of Season 4. A completely different person now. It may have taken a really long time, but he did come through. Now, would I say he's my favorite character or that he's the best developed character overall? No, but I do have a newfound appreciation for him now, and I hope that he keeps it up in Season 5. Let's move on to Darius. I thought he was used a little bit differently this season. In the other seasons, he served as the leader of the group, but here he sort of stepped aside, at least when it came to the group dynamic. Remember, Darius spends quite a lot of time apart from the campers because he was kidnapped by Kash, so he couldn't lead the campers in the usual way. But even though Darius was apart from the campers, he still played his part, because he was very clever this season. While he was kidnapped, he played the role of the inside man, the spy. He pretended to cater to Kash's dark side by pretending to hate dinosaurs and saying that he has really good ideas. Darius could read Kash like an open book. He knew just how to push Kash's buttons and really piss him off. On a lighter note, there's one particular scene with Darius that I really loved, and that's the scene of him trying to communicate with Pierce the Kentrosaurus. Just seeing how eager and excited he was. Actually, my wife literally made a comment out loud at this part saying, "Yep, that'd be Jeremy." For a brief moment, it was like watching the very first episode of Camp Cretaceous all over again, when Darius saw dinosaurs for the first time and seeing his face light up like a kid in a toy store. He had a lot of emotional moments this season, like the one I just mentioned, his friendship with Kenji getting fixed, and even the guilt he felt after going for the phone instead of stopping the dinosaur fight. He may have been used a bit differently this season, but he was still used very well. Moving on, we come to Brooklyn. Much like Kenji, Brooklyn was another character that stood out this season, and that's because the last couple of seasons didn't give her as much development as they could have, so what they gave her this season sort of made up for that. She displayed great leadership, ingenuity, and creativity. She took charge and led the campers to rescue Darius from Kash, and she even hacked the Brad X to act as a spy. And I like that she dropped the whole vlogger thing that would periodically resurface in other seasons. If you remember from last season, Brooklyn was so eager to solve the mystery of E750, but seemingly for her own interests and not Sammy's. But she learned from her mistakes. And in Season 4, vlogging and things of that nature were of no concern to her. She may have thrown in the occasional catchphrase that she would use in her vlogs, but she was more focused on protecting her friends. When she needed to figure something out, she did it for the sake of her friends and the dinosaurs. She's become very humble. Not that she was snobby or vain in the beginning, but she was just so wrapped up in being a social media influencer to worry about anything else. But again, she learned. And because of this growth, she's undoubtedly a valuable character in the series. Next up, we have Yasmina, who once again really stood out, but for different reasons than before. It's because of her new character development. We saw that Yasmina was suffering from post-traumatic stress, having nightmares about all the dinosaurs that tried to kill her. This is rather unique because we've never seen this explored to such a degree in the movie canon. Yeah, there was the Velociraptor dream scene in Jurassic Park 3, but that scene lasted only a few seconds, and it was never brought up again. And whenever Jurassic Park fans talk about that scene, it's usually done in humor. But here in Camp Cretaceous, this post-traumatic stress was anything but humorous because it constantly reared its ugly head. And not just for Yasmina either. All the campers had their fair share of nightmares. It's just that in Yasmina's case, she seemed to be affected the most by it. And I could be wrong, but in one of her nightmares, there was a picture of her mom in her sketchbook, and I was under the impression that Yasmina's mother passed away. It may not have been a lot, but we did learn enough that Yasmina was very close with her mother. Yasmina brought a sense of realism into the story that, like I said earlier, has not been done to such an extent. It wasn't watered down, and it wasn't too hardcore when it came to showing how the nightmares affected her. But Yasmina didn't stand out just because of the bad things she went through, but also for how she persevered through the bad times. She still powered through to protect and support her friends. And speaking of friends, she acted really funny whenever she tried giving Kenji and Brooklyn some alone time. Ben had no clue what was going on, but Yasmina knew, and that's what made it so funny. She could just tell that there was something going on between Kenji and Brooklyn. When it comes to the female characters, I still think Yasmina's the best developed one overall. Brooklyn's right under her, and then we have Sammy, who in my opinion has been very inconsistent when it comes to character development. It feels like every other season she gets a fair amount of development, but in the seasons in between, she doesn't. Which is very unfortunate for this season, considering that Manticore finally makes their appearance. The people who Sammy had to spy for, the people who blackmailed her family, the people who wanted dinosaur DNA. They finally show up, but nothing really happened between them. This would have been the perfect opportunity for Sammy to confront Kash. Now, I'm not saying Sammy should have pulled a Leroy Jenkins and just run in, but even when she collected herself and regrouped with the campers, there wasn't any confrontation with Kash later on. This could have been Sammy's season, her time to really shine. Now, I don't know if they're going to save something for her for next season, but right now it feels like there's no payoff, no high point for Sammy's character development, and she deserves better. That's not to say she didn't have any good moments this season, because she did. She was a real badass when she took the Brad's head to fire off some shots at the raptors. She stayed by Yasmina's side when she was having nightmares. And I also liked how she basically fell in love with the Spinoceratops babies, especially after the guilt she felt about how they were made. She had her moments here and there, but Sammy got the short end of the stick this season, so hopefully next season can make up for that. And last but not least, we come to an old favorite of mine, Ben. He may not have had as much screen time as some of the other characters, but I still have a lot to say about him, because he was used a lot differently this season. He still played the role of the toughened survivor, and he did have a few of those kinds of moments, but he also served as the comedy relief. That may sound like a bad thing, but in this case it's not, because he still maintained his personality balance as a character, and he wasn't downplayed or made to look like a lesser character. He just so happened to be there for the funny moments, and he was in a lot of them. Like when Dr. Turner accidentally punched him when he was trying to soothe her wounds, or even when he thought Yasmina was into him, if you know what I mean. And of course, in true Brave Ben fashion, we got to see him pull a Leroy Jenkins again when he jumped on a Pteranodon to get the tablet back. Ben's quite the jokester now. He made a lot of funny comments here and there. But in between the comedy bits, Ben also went through his fair share of growth too. In the beginning of the season, he was struggling with his confidence to the point where he was afraid of turning into the old Ben again and making mistakes. But he didn't give up. And finally, I like how they revisited the idea of Ben bonding with dinosaurs and how he was reluctant to do it again, especially after saying goodbye to Bumpy last season. So overall, I was satisfied with Ben's development this season. It may not be as much as he got in Season 2, for instance, but I like how we got to see something new with Ben, and he still maintained his newfound personality. And while I'm on the subject of new, Season 4 also gave us some new characters, and each of them were integral to the story. I'll start off with the brilliant and respected scientist Dr. May Turner. What was really interesting is that Darius already knew who she was because she wrote a book that Darius read back home. She quickly became a new friend to the campers and was sincere about wanting to help them get home. I also like her enthusiasm and her genuine love for the dinosaurs, especially with Pierce the Kentrosaurus. Dr. Turner and Ben should have a nice long conversation about bonding with dinosaurs. She was just a very genuine person, especially when it came to her work. Studying the behavior and brain activity of the dinosaurs, Dr. Turner was at the forefront of this emerging research, and was eager to expand the boundaries of what people can learn about dinosaurs. Unfortunately, and without her knowledge, Dr. Turner's research was not going to be used for the sake of good. Bad people wanted to do bad things with it. One of those bad people was her boss, and the newest villain of Camp Cretaceous, Dr. Robotnik. Wait a sec, Dr. Robotnik? Oh wait, sorry about that, I meant Kash. Close enough though, right? Now, I will discuss this in more detail later, but I thought Kash was a very cartoony villain. And yeah, I know Camp Cretaceous is essentially a cartoon, but still. He also reminds me of Danny Niedermeyer from the LEGO Jurassic World series Legend of Isla Nublar. For those of you who haven't seen that show, it's a cute and fun show. But in the show, Danny Niedermeyer is the nephew of Dennis Nedry that constantly tries to sabotage Jurassic World, but often resulting in comedic failure. But as cartoony as Kash was, he still brought a lot to the show as a character. First of all, Kash is voiced by Haley Joel Osment. I've always enjoyed his voice acting as Sora in the Kingdom Hearts games, and he did a fantastic job here with Kash's smug voice. Second, Kash works for Manticore, the people we were so curious to learn more about. And third, Kash served as a suitable adversary for the campers, especially Darius. Darius is the dinosaur lover. He wants to protect them and let them live in peace. Kash is the exact opposite. It was bad enough that he took pleasure in forcing dinosaurs to fight to the death, but he didn't even care that his mind chip devices might cause a baby dinosaur's head to explode. In fact, he was kind of entertained by that idea. And when I saw the baby Brachiosaurus in pain after Kash implanted the brain chip and started playing around with it, Kash is a very disturbed and psychotic individual with some serious anger issues to boot. Every time he got pissed, he wouldn't just get angry, he would throw things and smash things like a little kid having a temper tantrum. I can only imagine how many keyboards and controllers he broke from all the rage quitting he's done in life. And that's another thing. He acted very childish when he was playing the video game with Darius. Kash acted as though his manhood was being threatened, and Darius saw right through him. Darius knew how to get into Kash's head. Kash ended up winning the game, but only because he cheated. Then he acted all cocky like he's the best in the world, when really he's just a coward. If he had to cheat to win, then that just shows how unskilled and insecure he really is. Kash is all bark and no bite, and I absolutely hate him. But that's what makes an effective villain, right? But seriously, feed him to the Mosasaurus. Now how about the dinosaur action this season? I mean, it wouldn't be a Jurassic story without dinosaurs, right? That's right, it wouldn't be. We were going to see the Spinosaurus again, it was going to be great. And I have a lot to say about the dinosaur action and the Spinosaurus. But not in this section, because there were not a lot of exciting dinosaur scenes this season. And that's because most of the dinosaurs weren't even used very well. But more on that later. So for this section, I'm just going to talk about the new, never-before-seen creatures that we saw this season. I'll start off with the Kentrosaurus. It's great to see Camp Cretaceous give us new dinosaurs again, just like they have in every other season. Not only is the Kentrosaurus special because it's the first one we've ever seen, but also because this one was named Pierce and was a case study for Dr. Turner. Dr. Turner spent her time studying Pierce and their brain activity and learned a lot about how dinosaurs communicate, and they have a very strong bond as a result. Just like Blue, just like Bumpy, Pierce is another dinosaur that's bonded with a human, and I really like this idea. Now this next idea is something that I didn't think we'd ever see again. Hybrids. Yeah, going back to hybrids again. It's kind of funny because even though Colin Trevorrow confirmed that there aren't going to be any more hybrids in the movies after Fallen Kingdom, they sure have a funny way of popping up everywhere else. In Season 3 there was the Scorpius Rex, and now in Season 4 we have 2 Spinoceratops babies, which I will say are very cute, with their cute little stubby legs and their big beady eyes. But as cute as these things are, I feel that the whole hybrids thing has now run its course since Season 3 ended. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate the hybrids in Season 4 or even in Season 3, but I didn't expect the show to go much further with the idea of hybrids since there won't be any more hybrids in the movies after Fallen Kingdom. So as far as the Spinoceratops babies go, by the end of Season 4, we kind of get the impression that they'll live out their lives in peace in the snow biome and live happily ever after. And if they do, I'm okay with that. But as for the idea of hybrids in general, I just don't know what else there is to do other than mashing different dinosaurs together, but that really wouldn't add anything to the story. But anyway, let's get back to the new things we saw. Finally, there's the Smilodon, often referred to as the Sabretooth Tiger. Yeah, this isn't a dinosaur, but there isn't any other section for me to put it in, because Season 4 marks the first appearance of a prehistoric mammal in the movie canon. If you remember back in Jurassic Park, there were the Sabretooth Tiger plushies in the gift shop, and back in Season 1 of Camp Cretaceous, there was a brief appearance of mammoth bones in the lab. But here we actually got to see a living, breathing prehistoric mammal. And I especially liked the way it was used this season, because it gave us some fun scenes and created a feeling of mystery. We've never seen a prehistoric mammal before. Who made this thing? Was it Manticore? Somebody did. Sadly, it wasn't used in a lot of scenes, and it's dead now, but this is an instance where the quality outshined quantity. Now I want to take some time and talk about the things I particularly enjoyed this season, and then go over some of my favorite scenes afterwards. I already mentioned earlier that I really liked the character development this season, but I want to start this section by talking about the animation. The animation this season is something else that Season 4 did really well. Of course, the dinosaurs looked awesome, but I want to talk more specifically about the environments and the scenery. I thought they looked really cool. And because there were a lot of different places throughout this season, like the desert or the snow, I think the animators really took the time and effort to make all these places look amazing, rather than just focusing on one, like the jungle for instance. It was neat seeing all the different kinds of environments and all the details that went into them, like the sandstorm, the snow, and even the hologram walls that blended in with these environments. Sometimes when the characters go from one place to another, it's like they just appear out of thin air. So yeah, I think the animation is another thing that Season 4 did really well. Now I kind of mentioned this next part earlier when I was talking about Ben's character development, but Season 4 had a lot of comedy. The timing of the humor was very natural. There was nothing forced, there was nothing overly repetitive and annoying. So rather than just repeat what I said in Ben's character development section, I'm going to talk about two particular scenes that were really funny that I haven't talked about yet. One of them is the scene where all the campers are yelling at the top of their lungs around the campfire. Everyone's just letting it all out, and then the scene instantly cuts to them all passed out on the ground. The timing was perfect. The other funny scene is where Kenji and Darius are moving between doorways, and Kenji tells Darius that he's with Brooklyn now. And Darius's reaction was priceless. He immediately froze in the doorway and his jaw dropped. Just then, the door closed on him and kept opening and closing again. And every time it opened up again, Darius was still frozen, making that same shocked face. So to kind of wrap up the comedy section, I guess this kind of ties back into the character development section too, because one of the ways the character development was done is through comedy. Now there's one more particular thing I enjoyed this season. When it came to the science and technology this season, I thought a lot of it was out of place, but more on that later. But as far as the good parts of the science go, this particular topic had the most potential for expanding the science within the Jurassic franchise as it relates to the dinosaurs. And that's the notion of dinosaur psychology. Now yes, we've already seen this topic explored with Owen and the Raptor Squad back in Jurassic World, and it was even taken a step further with the Indoraptor in Fallen Kingdom. But what we saw here in Season 4 sort of served as a midway point between those two movies. Remember, Dr. Turner was studying the behavior of dinosaurs by studying their brain activity, their feelings, how they function, how they communicate, and how they react to different things. I like what they did with this in the beginning. The general concept of Dr. Turner's brain research is one of the pieces of science that I thought had the potential for growth, or at least tie together what we already know. So yeah, Season 4 definitely had some good things to show us. And now that I've talked about the things I liked in general, I'm going to go over a few of my favorite scenes this season that really stood out for me, in no particular order. The first one's the scene of the Mosasaurus attacking the boat in the beginning of the season. I thought it was interesting to see that it still chose to stick around Isla Nublar after it escaped from it last season. And the reason I like this scene is because when I was watching it destroy the boat piece by piece, it reminded me of one of my favorite movies, Jaws. And what's funny about that is that Yasmina mentions that she saw a shark movie that scarred her for life. And I can see where she's coming from. I remember watching Jaws the Revenge, and that's an hour and a half of my life I can't get back. But anyway, let's continue. I also enjoyed the Sabretooth Tiger chase from Episode 2, and that's because it features the Sabretooth Tiger, as well as my favorite character, Ben, in action. Because if you remember, Ben was the one who grabbed the torch and distracted the animal by leading it away from the campers. Given Ben's development, it made sense that he was the one that did this, because he would have had the best chance of pulling it off. So we got to see Survivor Ben in action again, but in a different setting this time. It wasn't the usual dinosaur chase in the jungle kind of scene. This time, the chase was in a desert canyon, so the terrain was much different. Rocky walls with only one way through, kinda like a maze, no trees, and many tight spaces. Ben was in a completely different place compared to what he's been used to, so this was sort of like a test of his skills, and I say he did pretty good. Now this next entry's kind of like a combination of scenes, but they all tie in with each other. And those are the ones involving the T-Rex family. But I don't mean the fights, I mean everything else about them. Like when Big Edie was caring for her baby after the drugs in their food made them fight each other, as I just mentioned. Or when Darius watched over an injured Big Edie in the medical bay. And the reason I like these scenes is because we got to see the nurturing, humane side of carnivorous dinosaurs that we haven't seen in a long time. There was the T-Rex family in The Lost World, and the raptors with their eggs in Jurassic Park 3, but those movies happened over 20 years ago. So it was good to bring this idea back after all this time. And last but not least, I want to take a moment to point out an injury that I sustained while watching Season 4. That's right, I actually got hurt when I was watching Season 4. I got hit really hard in the feels after watching Bumpy's cameo. I did not expect to see Bumpy at all. I honestly thought we were done with Bumpy, as far as Camp Cretaceous goes anyway. I thought Ben might mention her from time to time, which he did, but then we actually got to see her back on Isla Nublar, and she was at the camp. I think Ben made a comment about how Bumpy probably forgot about him by now, but she did not forget. And seeing her sad like that, this is not the last memory of Bumpy I want to be left with. You probably know by now that I'm an absolute sap for Bumpy, and some of you may even be sick of hearing this. And it's because of this that I feel that I need to at least mention this scene because it is important. This can't be the end. Now comes the part where I talk about the things I did not like about Season 4. And unfortunately, unlike the dinosaur section, this is going to be a big section because there were quite a few things I did not like, and they all kind of tie in with each other. The first thing I didn't like was the overall lack of dinosaurs in general. You cannot have a Jurassic story without dinosaurs being the main feature. That's why we enjoy these stories, for the dinosaurs. It doesn't always have to be just dinosaur chase scenes because there are other things you can do with them. In the first half of Season 4, there was a lot of potential for how the dinosaurs were being used in the story, like the whole thing with Dr. Turner's research. But all of that, the dinosaurs, the research, all of that was overshadowed by the second thing I didn't like, the overuse of technology. More specifically, the robots. Based on what we saw in the Season 4 trailer, it was clear that Camp Cretaceous was going to take things in a different direction. And that sounded great. Technology like this is something we've never seen in the Jurassic movie canon. So I was very curious as to what they were going to do with it. And I wasn't even against the idea of robots either. But that's because I assumed that the dinosaurs would be featured equally. But that didn't happen. Instead, we got an entire army of Terminators that overshadowed the dinosaurs. It was not well balanced. I would have been okay with a few of the regular Brad robots and maybe one Brad X. And if there was no other way around it, here's how I would have wanted to see it play out. Let's say that Kash was developing the prototype for the first and only Brad X, and he decides to test it out on the campers. It ends up failing in the end, but it still serves its purpose from a storytelling standpoint. It doesn't impact the bigger picture we see in Fallen Kingdom, or the one that we're going to see in Dominion. I mentioned earlier that Dr. Turner's brain research was a good starting point in terms of expanding the science of the Jurassic franchise, and I still believe that. But it was the application of the research that I didn't like, when Kash used it to control the dinosaurs like puppets. Come on, like one push of a button and the dinosaur's standing still like a statue, awaiting its next orders, which are given by the push of a button. Now I'm sure some of you might be thinking, well, what about the Indoraptor? The Indoraptor attacked the laser targets after someone pushed a button, and yes, that's true. But the difference is that the Indoraptor was conditioned that way over time. It took time to condition the Indoraptor to focus on the laser targets. It took time to train the Indoraptor to attack on command. Here, there is no time. The work's already been done. And I get that this applied mostly for the baby dinosaurs because their brains were still developing. But I just thought that the quick and convenient manner in which it all came together was a little bizarre for me. And because of the overuse of technology this season, I felt that the later episodes of Season 4 were very cartoony and very cliché, like something you'd see in a comic book or a video game. Like you have Kash, the cliché mad scientist in his secret lair with his big computer screens commanding his army of robots to do his dirty work. Like I said earlier, he's like Dr. Robotnik, and the Brad X's are like Ultron from the Avengers. I just thought the whole robot army thing was way too over the top for a Jurassic story. And to make matters worse, we're not even done with them yet, because there are still a bunch more of them around at the end of the season. Anyway, let's continue. The third thing I didn't like was the lack of explanation regarding the new island, the biodome, etc. How long has Manticore been there? Same with the dinosaurs. We still don't even know the name of the island, or even where it is. The only explanation we did get was basically, yeah, the island's got different environments all over the place to study different terrains. Well, duh, I kind of figured that after seeing the trailer. Having a bit of mystery in stories can be a good thing as long as it gets resolved or at the very least progresses towards a conclusion. But for Season 4, we didn't really get either of those things. Maybe they'll address these things in Season 5, and if they do, I'm okay with that. But as of right now, we don't know. We're almost there because this next thing is the last thing I didn't like. I already mentioned that there was a lack of dinosaurs in general, so what I'm about to talk about ties in with that. But there's one specific dinosaur I'm especially upset about, the Spinosaurus. And the reason I'm dissatisfied about the Spinosaurus in particular is because it was one of the biggest things I was looking forward to this season. And I feel like it suffered the same fate as the majority of the dinosaurs this season. It wasn't used very well. There was a severe lack of Spinosaurus scenes this season. And the ones it did have weren't even that memorable, except when it killed the Smilodon. That was cool. But other than that, really not that special. And that sucks. This is the Spinosaurus we're talking about. Again, I was really looking forward to seeing it again after all this time and hopefully get some answers. But we didn't get anything, other than it doesn't like people. We didn't get to know how it survived all this time, how long it's been on this new island. Heck, we don't even know if it's the same one from Jurassic Park 3. It might just as well be a random Spinosaurus, because there was nothing to distinguish it as the Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3. Even if they just did a quick mention of how they took it from Isla Sorna a long time ago and they've been taking care of it ever since. At least it's something. For all we know, someone could have made another Spinosaurus, and the one we saw in Jurassic Park 3 is dead. We don't know, because they don't say. And one more thing about the Spino, and it's something that I noticed a lot of people have a similar opinion about, so I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks this. But they didn't even use the Spinosaurus roar from Jurassic Park 3. Sure, maybe they used a few grunts or some heavy breathing sounds, but not the actual roar itself. Why, though? It sounded like a watered-down Scorpius Rex, so it wasn't even a new roar, it was just something recycled, only less cool. So considering everything that happened this season, now what? What does this mean for the future of Camp Cretaceous? There's a lot of questions that have yet to be answered. For instance, how are the campers going to get home? Remember, the campers sent out a distress signal in Season 2, and it was received by somebody, but that somebody apparently ignored it. In Season 3, it seemed like they were finally going home on the yacht, but that didn't go so well either. In Season 4, Darius was able to make a quick phone call to his brother Brandon back home. The call may have been cut short, but now Brandon knows that Darius is still alive. So it looks like he's going to set out to find him. This was a rather interesting scene because before Brandon got the phone call, he was brokenhearted because he thought Darius was dead. It was not a very long scene, but we got to see how the Jurassic World incident affected one of the families of the campers, so maybe the rest of the families will join Brandon and form a big search party. Or should I say, all the families except for Kenji's, because, surprise, Kenji met his father at the end of the season, and it turns out that Kenji's father is the big boss of Manticore. I did consider that Kenji's dad might have some kind of connection with Manticore, but as an investor, kinda like how he invested in Jurassic World. But I didn't think he'd be the actual president. But when they specifically didn't show his face until the very end, that's when I kinda realized, okay, it's probably him. But still, it was a good twist. Throughout the show, we've seen that Kenji's dad was really rich, but also absent throughout Kenji's life, and now we know why. So we saw a little bit of what he's up to right now, but what other kinds of things is he up to? After all, he was a highly valued investor in Jurassic World. So it's possible that he could have had access to inside information that he could share with Manticore. He could have been an undercover spy. Could he be the way off the island the campers are looking for? And will his relationship with Kenji get better, or worse? On a lighter note, you want to know something funny about him before I move on? If you're an anime fan, you might have a similar opinion as mine, but doesn't Kenji's father look like Mori Kogoto from Detective Conan? I'm serious. The mustache, the slicked hair, the suit... If you're curious, go to Google image search and type in Detective Conan Mori Kogoto. That's M-O-U-R-I space K-O-G-O-R-O. Maybe that's it. Maybe Mori Kogoto got so famous from all the cases he solved that he had to change his name and work for a different company in order to protect his identity. Nah, just kidding. Finally, I want to talk about the biggest question on my mind right now. What are the connections going to be between Camp Cretaceous and Jurassic World Dominion? So far, Camp Cretaceous has tied in with Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom very well, but what about Dominion? Colin Trevorrow has confirmed that Camp Cretaceous will tie into Jurassic World Dominion. But how? It better not be the robots. If I had to guess based on Season 4, the best thing I can think of so far is that maybe Dr. Turner's brain research will be referenced or something. Or maybe Season 4 won't be referenced at all. Maybe it'll be something in Season 5. I just hope it's something good. So after everything I've talked about in this video, we now come to the final section, where I give my final thoughts. On one hand, there are some good things about Season 4. The character development was great, the animations were great, it was funny, and it even expanded the science of the franchise. On the other hand, there are some bad things about Season 4 as well. a lack of dinosaurs, a lack of explanation, and an excess of robots. So as for my overall opinion, let's think back to the question I asked in the beginning of this video. Did the good stuff outweigh the bad stuff, or was it the other way around? Well, I hate to say it, but it was the other way around for me. And the reason I say that is because Season 4 didn't really feel like a Jurassic story. It felt more like Terminator, or a Sonic game, or even iRobot. The dinosaurs weren't used enough, and the robots were used too much. It was poorly balanced in my opinion. Season 4 could have been better if it was balanced better. The first half of the season was good, I like it a lot, but the second half is where it falls short. I don't hate this season, but it's definitely the weakest entry in the series so far. As of right now, I still think that Season 3 is the best. I'm sure I'll come back to Season 4 again, and maybe some of my opinions might change after a second viewing. If they don't, well, hopefully Season 5 can fix all that. It might be a bumpy road right now, but we just gotta hang in there. We'll get there. And on that note, this concludes my review of Season 4 of Camp Cretaceous. What did you think about Season 4? What kind of things do you think Season 4 got right, or wrong? Talk about it in the comments and have some fun. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more Jurassic content, including reviews of other seasons of Camp Cretaceous, check out my channel. And if you want to keep seeing more Jurassic content, subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.